Okay, we up to a brand new parak, Nun Dalin Amid Aleph, and the site of all this parakim is when a person makes an neder, we go up to Lashon B'nai Adam, again for the umpteenth time. Therefore, it's interesting that these are brought down la halacha. Why the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch should simply say by Nedarim we go after Lashon B'nai Adam. Look at the place you are, the time and place you are, and what do people call milk? So, for example, my chavusa, he drinks milk. He doesn't drink real milk. He drinks almond milk or soy milk. So if 20, 30 years ago, you would have made a neder on milk, it only meant cow's milk. It didn't mean any other milk, correct? But Bizman Hazeh, you'd have to ask the Shaila, is almond milk b'chlal or is soy milk b'chlal? Again, we go after Lashon B'nai Adam, what people call milk. So it's interesting to note that we have dafim after dafim halacha telling us what a person means. So I saw the shot of the Radvaz. That's one of the Purushim on the Rambam. He said that if there's no existing lashon, in other words, nishtaher, these lashonos would be invoked. But einachinami, if let's say, for example, yesterday's daf, that the gourds, we call gourds a vegetable. We call deluin a vegetable, right? We're not thinking much of a shaila. That bisman hazeh, if a person made a neder not to have enough from vegetables, that gourds would be b'chlal. Yet the Gemara there had a shaila, because at that time the shaila was, what do you call a vegetable? Actually, you know what? It's not yesterday's daf, it's today's daf. Okay, that's why you're looking at me with like, okay, so that's a good segue into today's daf. Here we go. Hanoidim in a yerek. Someone makes a neder not to have enough from vegetables. So mutta bidluin, you'd be mutta bidluin. Says the Ran, why? The loy have a yerek ela pri. In fact, it's not a vegetable, it's a fruit. The ist mefarshe, the stam yerek nechal kemoshu chai. Stam yerek is eaten raw. The deluin ain't okay. Deluin requires some type of preparation, some type of cooking. So two pshatim. Either one, that it's not a vegetable b'chlal, or two, it's a vegetable, but when you say vegetable, you mean raw, and this doesn't happen to be raw, this happens to be cooked. We're going to go with the first pshat, that it's a pri. Okay, we're going to go with the first pshat, that it's a pri. So now, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva, Oysa, back in the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says, no, if you make a neder from a yerek, you are not permitted to go ahead and eat deluin. So Amalei Rabbi Akiva, they told Rabbi Akiva, 1 second. A person sends his shliach to the marketplace and tells him, kachli yerek, and buy for me vegetable. But who oimer, and he returns and says, lo matzasi ela deluin, I only found deluin. So obviously it must be deluin is not a vegetable, or else he would have bought it, correct? Or else he would have bought it. Ella, so when you see that the shliach comes back and says it, must be that's not in that category. Amalahem, says Rabbi Akiva, Kena Dava. That's a riot to exactly what I am saying. In other words, he didn't come back and say, I didn't find kitnius. He said, I only found the luin. So in other words, it must have some shaykhs to it if he went ahead and said, I didn't find luin. He didn't come back and say, I didn't find hot dogs. I only found hot dogs. He didn't come back and say, I only found potato pudding. He came back and said the luin. Why? Because the luin must have some shaykhs to the vegetable, says Rabbi Akiva. Therefore, it's a raya. Anoidim in a yerek is also the luin. The raya that you want to bring that it's not, in fact, is. So the chachamim, they hold, if the shliach has to come back and consult, then it's not b'chal the neder. And Rabbi Akiva holds no dafke. If he comes back and consult, it is b'chal the neder. This is machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Tanakama. Elishad the luin b'chal yerek, the kitnius ain't b'chal yerek. So that's. V'asa, if you make a neder from Pula Mitzri, v'asa, the Pula Mitzri lach, you be also in Pula Mitzri lach, that's considered a yerek. Umutta biyavesh. Once the Mitzri, this Egyptian bean, is dried out, then we're going to see it becomes part of a kri. It's like dagon. You go ahead and you pile it up like grain. So therefore, once you're piling it up like grain, it's not b'chal yerek. But in its form, it's dry, it's wet, moist form, then it's b'chal yerek. So Yitzim Dvareinu, we have machlokes by the luin, and undermining the machlokes of the luin is whether the contingent upon a shliach coming back and asking a question or not. Right? But if the shliach has to come back and ask a question, it's not bichlal. If the shliach has to come back and ask the question, Rabbi Akiva says it is. Okay, so now it's very funny because l'chara we understand the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the chachamim very well. So now what happens? Hanoidim in a yerek. Fred the Gemara of min yerek nadar. He says the Ran, there be a kiva parach. Heichi asa b'deluin. How could you say deluin is what asa? The min yerek neder. The deluin lav yerek ninu. Ela pri. Again, going back to the first shot we accepted. It is a fruit. It's not a yerek. So how could it be a kiva say it's what? It's asa. So why would you tell me? But 1 second, Rabbi Kiva gave his reason. He said, if a shliach has to come and consult with you, it must be that what? That it has shaykhs to it. Continues the Ran. Since they pile it up, until it dries out and you pile it up, it's b'chal yerek. Right? V'loi pri. Ela deluin kasha. Now, the afal gav, and even though the Rabbi Akiva, Yohav Taima, Rabbi Akiva tells you the reason why he holds right, it is b'chal yerek, shliach, because the shliach will have to consult with you. So, Fred Duran, what's the Gemara's kasha? Rabbi Akiva, Fred the Gemara kasha, how could you tell me the luin is a yerek? It's a pri. But Rabbi Akiva says the reason. I'll tell you why. You call it a pri, the bottom line is the shliach is going to come back and tell you, you know what? They only had deluin. So it must be that even if it's a pri, it has a kesha to yerek. So what's the Gemara's kasha? Rabbi Kiva tells you his reason. Because the shliach says to come back and consult with you. Says the Ran, loy sagile. That's not enough for the hahu taima. It's not enough for that reason. Kiven de min yerek nadar udeluin lav yerek ninu. In other words, says the Ran, the Gemara is not buying Rabbi Akiva's reasoning. His reasoning that the shliach will come back doesn't hold water. It doesn't hold water. That alone doesn't hold water. Why? Because in its state of not being cooked, as we're going to see, it's a pri. Once it's a pri, it's not a yerech. Why in the world would Rabbi Akiva hold its asa? Back in the Gemara. V'hamin yerech nadar amaula v'oimer yerake kedera alai. He didn't say stam yerek. He said yerake kedera alai. He says an extra lashon. He says a lashon of kedera. That extra lashon, right, with the combination that a shliach will come, will go ahead and make it asa. Says the Ran, Ama'ula, Boime Yeraki Kedera Alai, the Kivin de Miyaser Lishne, since he added on an extra lashon of Kedera, Lemichlal de Luinasi, it comes to include the Luin, Kivin de Mimlach Shlicha Alayu. In other words, let's look at it as kind of, here you have a Yerek, here you have the Luin, totally different worlds. Comes along the shliach and says, I only found the luin. So it would take it a little bit out of that world and put it kind of over here, take it away from fleishiks and make it parav. Once he says the word kedera, and we know the luin goes in the kedera, so combined with the fact that a shliach is going to come, then it makes it asa the yerek. Says the abular, we have to say something more in the Mishnah. When it said haynoidim in a yerek, that enough won't do the job. Even though the shliach will be mimlach, that's not enough to do the job. Hanoidim in yarke kedera, that's enough to do the job. That's the ukim. That extra lashon puts it in the ballpark. Says the Gemara, Ula, it's speaking where he says yarke kedera lai. Fred the Gemara, v'dilma yerek hanechal bekedera. Maybe it means a yerek that is eaten in the kedera. The Ran speaks out. Maybe it's garlic or onion, which gives tam to the kedera. How do you know it means the actual vegetable itself? Maybe it means something that you don't eat itself, but you're putting in the pot for the purpose of giving it what? Extra flavor. Says the Kamar, he's saying the yerek that is cooked in the kedera. It's not going on the accoutrement of that's allowing the taste to be better, better in the taste, but it's going after that itself. So the person says neda yerek hamisvashel b'kedera alai, and that would asa the luin, because the luin is even though it's a pri, once a shliach would ask about it, and once it's cooked in the kedera, then it's that Rabbi Akiva would hold its asa. Rabbanan Savri, kol milsa that tzarich shliach lemluchela, as we spoke out in the Mishnah, anything that you need the shliach to go ahead and consult on, lav minahu, that's not the same in. So it says in other words, like this. Look at me, using on my same. He said, the lashon of yerek amispashal b'kadeira. He said yerek that's cooked in the kadeira. It doesn't make a difference. This is a pre. The shliach has to go ahead, and the shliach would bring it over here, and that lashon then would bring it over here. It never leaves here. The fact that the shliach has to ask, it stays what it is. It's a pre. Nothing. Therefore, hanoidim in a yerek, and you say kadeira is mispashal alai, it doesn't make a difference because since even if the shliach has to ask, it doesn't move the fact that the lumen is a pre. It is what it is. That's the chachamim, and that's why it's muta b'deluin. However, Rabbi Kiva Savar in the back in the Gemara, Kol Milsa the Mamluch L'Shlicha Allah Minahu. Anyone that a shliach has to go ahead and ask on, that is its min. That would be its min. Okay, so that and there we have the model, and the fact that he said what that it was mispashal the kadeira, then what? Then it would go ahead and move it all the way to be in the category of a vegetable. Amar Abaya. Moider Akiva Linyan Malchus Shein Aloika. Now we know that if a person's over in a neda, you get Malchus of the Issa of Layachal Devaro. You should not profane your name. Says Rabbi Akiva, it's really a suffix. The only reason we're going to go ahead and move it off the fact that it's a pre from the fact that a shliach will ask, and B, more importantly, the extra lashon of Tavshal Misvashal B'Kadeira. So since the whole thing depends upon the person's extra lashon, it's a suffix to what state will give it. You will not go ahead and get Malchus for it. It's a suffix. Okay. We know there's something called Me'ilah. We've done this quite a few times in our life. And even in the share, the people, I'm looking at all the people, you will have heard this. That a Me'ilah is when you have enough from Hegdish. Having enough from Hegdish can be one of two ways. You have enough, or you take it out of Rishus Hegdish, correct? Then we said a person who does that has to pay a keren, a chaimish, and bring a carbon asham Me'ilas. We also said there's a unique halacha by Me'ilah of yesh shliach ledavar aveira, that if a person goes ahead, usually if you send something to do an aveira, we say divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishomin. The words of the Rav, the Rebbeinu Shalom says don't do something. The words of the Talmud who says do something. You listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the dinner we learn at Chet from Truma that yesh shliach ledavar aveira. So in other words, if you go ahead and tell a shliach to take something out of Hegdish, and you're unaware that it's Hegdish, you would be moil. Either shliach did the action, it doesn't make a difference. That's yesh shliach levar avera. Okay, let's see with that backdrop. Let's see. Tanan Hasa. And we're going to ask a question on Rabbi Akiva, guys. We're going to ask a question on Rabbi Akiva. Hashliach shasa shlichusay. A shliach that does what he was told to do. Balabayis moil. Then the shliach would not be over a milah, but the balabayis would be, because yesh shliach levar avera when it comes to milah. Chet mitruma. Lo yasa shlichusay. If he deviates and he doesn't do a shlichus, then shliach mal. Then the shliach would be mal. Okay. Man Tana. Who's this Tana? Amar Chisda masnisan like Rabbi Akiva. That Mishnah in Daf Chaf in the Ila is not like Rabbi Akiva. We didn't get to the reason yet, but we're going to say it's not like Rabbi Akiva. Ditnan. Here's the reason. Ketzat. You want to know an example of a shliach doing a shlichus where the balabayis is mal and where he doesn't do the shlichus and he's mal? Ketzat. Amaloi tein basel archim. You tell the shliach, give meat to the archim. Now you're unaware that the meat is hegdish. V'nasan lahem kaved, and he gives him liver. So the shaila at hand is liver meat or not. He breaks out the good stuff, right? He breaks out the good stuff, the liver, and he. The question is liver meat or not? If liver is meat, then the balabayis is mal. If liver is not meat, then the shliach is mal. Tein kaved v'nasan lahem basa. Give them kaveh, give him liver, and then he gives them what basar. Now, guys, shliach mal. So let's 1 second. The shliach is mal. That meaning he didn't do his shlichus, correct? Why? Because liver is not meat, and therefore he didn't do what the balabayis wanted. In the ratio, the balabayis wanted meat. In the sefer, the balabayis wanted liver. In both cases, he deviated. Now, if you would send someone to the butcher shop for meat, and would he come back and say they only had liver? Yeah, I would think so, right? I would think so, that you would be mimlach. And nonetheless, we see the shliach is mal. So we see that that it's not considered. In other words, the fact that you would go ahead and come back and be mamlech and consult is not a raya that the object you're saying is the object. It's not a raya that the Deluin is a yerek just because you'd come back. Rabbi Akiva used that as a raya. Since the shliach would go ahead and say, look, they didn't have Yerakos, they had Deluin, so he would also hold. They don't have basa, they only had kaved. Yet we see basa is not kaved, so it must be Deluin is not fruit, meaning it's not a yerek. Meaning the fact that they be mimlach is not enough of a reason to change the mitzias of what it is. So by meat, it doesn't change liver into meat. And by vegetables, it doesn't change the deluin, which is a fruit, into a vegetable. That's I afraid the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva, kol milsa de mimlach shliach. Minahu. Anything that a shliach would ask is what? Is its gender, its species. Memela, we know a person would ask and say they only have liver. Yet we see the shliach is mild. So we see that the fact that a shliach would answer is not a perfect reason. Let me just finish reading it. So I'm Rabbi Akiva kol milsa imlach l'shliach minei who limal balabayis loy limal shliach. So the balabayis should be moil and not the shliach, according to Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi, I feel Rabbi Akiva. You can even say it's according to Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Miloi moida Rabbi Akiva would Rabbi Akiva on the base. Would Rabbi Akiva not be moida? It's sarich im luche that you would have to go back. Says the Ran. Miloi moida Rabbi Akiva that sarich im luche hilkach. Linyan milas shliach vadai kivin it sarich im luche. Since he would have to tell him 1 second they only had kaved. V'loi mimlach and he doesn't. He's acting upon his own self, and therefore the shliach will be moil. The whole time he doesn't go ahead and consult with me. He won't give him kaved. Therefore he didn't do a shlichus. Nedarim kivin bechlal lishnehu mimlach aleim shliach noida amay samech alavadai bekuli osanavshe. There's a big difference between Me'ilah and Nedarim. By Me'ilah, we need to know whether Shliach did a Shlichus or not. If he goes ahead and takes kaved and doesn't consult back with the owner, right? So he's acting upon himself because he'd have to go ahead and go back, tell the owner 1 second. You want me to give meat? There's no meat. There's kaved. He'd have to go back and ask. Miloi moida Rabbi Akiva that tzarichem luchei. Rabbi Akiva would be moida that physically he'd have to go back to ascertain whether he's doing shlichus or not. By Nedarim, you don't need shlichus, guys. By Nedarim, we're using the concept of shlichus to define what exactly is the object under the neder. You're bringing in the same concept, but in one concept, you need to go ahead and act upon that. And the other one, it's just a definition. By Me'ilah, right? I told you meat. Good. You go ahead and give kaved. 1 second. Meat and kaved, although close by, kaved's not meat. You'd have to go back and say to the one who sent you, I didn't find meat, I only found kaved. Since he didn't go back, he did it himself, the shliach, and therefore he's moil, not the balabayas. Because you need the physical act of requesting. What's the shaila by diluin? Do you need him to go back and say, I don't find Yerakos, I only find the luin? Or do you need it conceptually, since a person could do that, then we will define the luin as a yerek versus a pri. That's all we need. Because by Nedarim, we go after Lashon B'nai Adam. So Rabbi Akiva, it could be the Tana of Mila, even though even though by Nedarim, it's different. By Nedarim, all you need to know is this piece of the luin considered a yerek or not? How could you go ahead and figure that out by Nedarim? Well, after all, a shliach hypothetically would go back and ask, but you don't need him to physically ask. And therefore, we can define the luin from a pri when you use the lashon of bishul kadera, that what? It's considered a yerek. Because the shliach would go ahead and ask. Masha'en kavai mila, you need the physical act of asking, and you don't have it. And the Mamela Rabbi Akiva would agree that the shliach, therefore, who goes ahead and serves kaved, he's moil, not the balabas. I think it's a beautiful distinction. Let's see in the Ran again, guys. Mila Rabbi Akiva that tzarech l'muchei hilkach linyan mila shliach vadai kiven dit tzarech l'muchei. Underline the word tzarech. He needs to go ahead and consult. V'loy nimlach, and he didn't. Adai did the nafshi of it. He did his own thing. Ubalabayis nami somech, and the balabayis also somech. The chol kamad loy nimlach, as long as he doesn't consult with him, lo yitin lehem kaved. He's not going to give him kaved because he had a mind basar. The only time the balabayis would change his mind to kaved is when he's informed that there's no basar, there's only liver. Hilkach loy asa shlichusa. He didn't do his shlichus, and therefore the shliach is mile. Avalin in Nedarim, even the bechlal lishnehu, the hamimlach aleihem shlicha noider. Amai samech. What's he samech on? Alavadai bekulei asa nafshe. Vadai is asa in everything, whatever is considered in the ballpark. I've defined it a little differently with a little more hezbah. Very nice. Okay, continues the Gemara. So Rabbi Akiva could be the Tana in the Mishnah in Mila. Itmar Shmait Shmait's Kamei the Rava. Amalahoin Shapa Amanachmeni. Abaya liked this teretz very much. Rava liked this teretz very much. That Abaya, who was called Nachmeni, right? Abaya was called Nachmeni. He, in fact, what said good. Usually, Rava and Abaya argue throughout Shas. Here we have him going ahead and agreeing with the teretz, the distinction between Ne'ilah and Nedarim. Interesting to note why all of a sudden, because he calls it on Nachmeni, the Ran explains. It says the Ran, it mishmaitza kamei the Rava, says the Ran, ma'idim b'taretz Abaya, masnisin the Me'ilah, aliba the Rabbi Akiva, v'amar lahain, shapa oma Nachmeni. And who's Nachmeni? Says the Ran, hainu Abaya, the Karli hachi lefi shen niskadel bebeis Rabba bar Nachmeni. He was an orphan. He was raised by his uncle, so he was called Rabba bar Nachmeni. We saw another place that he got the acronym Abaya because of the pasuk in Hoshaya of B'cha, Asher B'cha Yeruchim Yasam, right? Asher, Aleph, B'cha, Beis, Yeruchim Yasam. It's a pasuk in Hoshaya, Yudalid Dalid. We had it before. It's a Haftarah Bashas Vayetze. That's the acronym. It's a in Gittin. Rashi brings it in the Hashaleach and the Lamids. Okay, now Rabbi Shimon says. Who's the Tana that argues on Rabbi Akiva? There's a Tana that argues on Rabbi Akiva and says that what, even though a shliach has to be milmach, it's still not in B'chal Dened. Who's that Tana? It's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Where we see that, the Tanya. Anoidim in a basar. Someone makes a neder not to have enough in basar. Asa b'chol mini basar. He'd be asa in all types of basar. All types of basar. Basar b'roish, the head, no beef cheeks for him. Uberaglayim. No pcha, the fislach, you won't be able to have. Right? I'm doing this for Vami Weiner. Ubekana, yeah, the trachea, and they would stuff the trachea with something. Ubekaved, liver, ubelev, the heart. They used to eat the heart. We don't eat the Jew. It's funny, the Ashkenazim don't eat hearts. We have a serve from Tashbas, it's kosher l'shikcha. If you eat the heart of an animal, it's going to cause you to forget. The Sfardim eat it, but the Ashkenazim don't. Ubeoifois and birds. Again, is birds considered meat or not? Be aware there's a shita, Rabbi Yossi Galili guys, that milk and chicken is kosher. Right? Remember we had a Gemara in Yavamis, there's a Taisus Yidalad we saw, then the place they would eat, place Rabbi Yossi Galili, they would eat milk and chicken together. That was their Masara. Okay. Umuta, so all those would be us. In other words, all those are considered meat. Umuta b'basa dogim, fish, the chagavim and grasshoppers. They would eat grasshoppers. Okay, so that's the Tanakama, and that's very comprehensive. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, but this is the one who argues. Listen to what he says. Hanoidim in abasa, asa b'chol mini basa. You asa in all type of basa, but mamish basa. Umuta, you'd be permitted b'roish b'raglayim b'kone b'kove b'leiv b'oifais. You'd be permitted to eat all of those things. Why? Because it's not meat. Now, I assume all those things, the shliach would come back and ask, and nonetheless, it's mutter. Provayim, kishka, lav basa, is not considered basa. V'achleim lav barinish, and anyone who eats it is not a person. Okay, that doesn't mean the way it sounds, because I lose some people from the screen. What it means is that they have a choice between basa and krevayim to buy, and they choose to buy kishka, then they're not people. So the choice of meat and kishka, you go with the meat. Okay. Anyway, the kishka we have is not real kishka. Kishka you have is stuffed carrots. You're eating tam-tams, whatever it is. Anyway, now the Indian zvini la barinish. What does it mean? That the Indian zvini buying basa, if you're going to pick and buy krevayim over basa, you're not a person. Ma'ishna basa oif l'tanakama de asar, the avet shliach de mimlach alaha. So in other words, guys, we stop. We've proven our point. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is of the opinion the only thing that's meat is meat. Oifos, lave, even pot kaveh, all those things are not meat. Why? Because a shliach would come ask on that. We don't care, because meat is meat. You go after mamish what the guy meant, and even though despite the fact the shliach would go back and consult with you on those other forms, nonetheless it's still mutter. That's so he's the Tana of a Mishnah. Even though a shliach would come and go back to a Mishnah and ask you if you made a Nedarim and a Yerek, he'd ask you about the Luin. Nonetheless, it would be mutter. Good. So now we're just going to go ahead and digress and discuss the machloikis. So again, you had Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva would say, since the shliach comes back, all these things would be aser. Okay. Now oif. Why is oif mutter? Chicken. Because when you say meat, you mean meat. You don't mean chicken. Most of us here, when we say meat, we don't mean chicken. We say chicken or meat, right? What do you want? You serve chicken or meat in your mind. Meat is meat, and chicken is just chicken. Okay, so why does Mandi what's the reason for chicken? Why would he hold its asa? The ovet shliach, the mimel chala, basa dagam nami ovet shliach, right? Basa dagam also. You got tuna steak, halibut. I'm running out of fish that I know. I think that's enough. Salmon, right? Salmon, teriyaki. Anyway, the Eloi mishkach bisra mimlach aleha. If he doesn't find basar, he'll come back and consult and say, "I fish." The Omar, the Eloi mishkach bisra, I see dogim. The litzru. So the chayra, since according to Mandi Omar, guys, according to Mandi Omar, that chicken would be asar. What's the reason? Because the shliach would come back and say, I didn't find meat, I only found chicken. If a person would say meat, it's possible a person would come back and say, I didn't find chicken, I didn't find meat, I only found fish. So what's the difference between birds, chicken, and fish? That chicken is asa, because a person would be mimlach. Fish also a person would be mimlach. Rabbi, shehikis dam, speaking nukimta, that this price is speaking where you did akasas dam. One of the health things they used to do in the old days, they would bloodlet. On the days that you would bloodlet, you wouldn't eat fish. So therefore, you're right. Normally, if it wasn't bloodlet days, just as chicken would be asar, fish also would be asar. But this happens to be a day that you bloodlet, and therefore, the Brisa said you could eat fish. You didn't, in the neder, you didn't mean chicken. You didn't mean fish because you wouldn't eat fish. If it's a day that you bloodlet, you should not only eat fish, you shouldn't eat chicken either. Dama Shmuel the musker, it means Shmuel was a doctor, he said if you go with bloodlet from your shoulder, the ochel bisra, it's safra, and you eat bird poultry, porach libe, but kitzafra, your heart will fly out of you like a fish, like a bird. So l'chayra, just as if it's speaking about hakazas dam, and that's why you can't, that's what a neder won't be chal on fish. Who adin, it should not be chal the neder on chicken, because again, if you bloodlet, you shouldn't eat chicken. Tanya emakis and loyal dogim, loyal loifos. You don't do hakazas dam on fish or on leifis. Loyal basam maliach with salted meat. Tanya hikis dam loyochel locholav like vinov like beitzim like shechlayim is cress loyoifis like basam maliach. So l'chayr you have a kasha. If you tell me you bloodlet, then your neder should not be chal, just like your neder is not chal on fish, it shouldn't be chal on chicken either. So if you overcook the chicken, you're able to eat it if you bloodlet. Mashenkin dogim, you can't. So therefore, since the possibility exists to go ahead and eat chicken. I mean, a chicken office. I'm using the office, using the word chicken. Since you could eat chicken, the possibility therefore you need the schal on chicken. Abaye Omer going, it's speaking not where your blood led, it's speaking the kaivin enayim. Person has pain in his eyes. The dagim kosher enayim. Fish is bad for the eyes. Hihachi achol dagim. You should eat dagim. The ha'omar rishmuel nun samech ayin. That means nuna. Nun is nuna eyes, and sama is what? It's nun is fish. Excuse me. Nun masach ayin. So fish is a remedy for the eyes. So if you're telling me that if your eyes are bad, you should eat fish. Says that's the end of the disease. If towards the end of the disease, then fish is good. But in the beginning of the disease, fish is not good. So it's speaking when the person has the beginning of the disease, therefore he had in mind. When he made the neder, he had in mind the Nedarim. So again, classic case of by Nedarim, Hacham Achal Hashem B'nei Adam. Shaila is a person, between Machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Like Rabbi Akiva, the fact that a shliach would put it in the category. According to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, will know the fact that a shliach would ask would not put it in the category. It's in that brisa. And I wish everyone a very, very good day. Thank you for listening.